Right, hello. Today I'm going to be talking about negative feedback loops in biology. We will touch on positive feedback loops as well, but the main focus will be on negative feedbacks. We're going to start off with some definitions. Feedback is defined as the information gained about a reaction to a product, which will allow the modification of that same product. Feedback loops are therefore the process by which a change to the system results in an alarm which will trigger a certain result. That result will either increase the change to the system or reduce it to bring the system back to normal. A few questions arise. How do these systems work? What is positive feedback? What is negative feedback? And where do we find these systems in nature? So biological systems operate on a mechanism of inputs and outputs. Each are caused by and cause a certain event. A feedback loop is a biological occurrence wherein the output of a system amplifies the system. That would be a positive feedback, or inhibits the system, which would be a negative feedback. So feedback loops are important because they allow living organisms to maintain homeostasis, and homeostasis, as we all know, is the mechanism that enables us to keep our internal environment relatively constant. The level of energy that an organism needs to maintain homeostasis depends on the type of organism, as well as the environment it inhabits. For example, a cold-blooded fish keeps its temperature on the same level as the water around it, and so it doesn't need to control its internal temperature. And compared to a warm-blooded whale in the same environment, it would need to keep its body temperature higher than that of the water around it, and so it will expend more energy in temperature regulation. And that's generally the difference between ectotherms and endotherms. An ectotherm, such as a reptile, amphibian, or a fish, uses environmental temperatures to control its internal temperature, whereas endotherms use homeostasis to maintain internal temperature. And so feedback loops can also occur at a larger degree. At the ecosystem level, a form of homeostasis is maintained. A good example of this would be the cycle of predator and prey populations. A boom in a prey population will mean more food for predators, which will increase predator numbers, and which will lead to overpredation eventually, and then the prey population will again decline, and the predator population will then decline in response, releasing the pressure on the prey population and allowing it to bounce back. And so it's this constant cycle of a predator-prey population and counteracting balances again and again. So we get into negative feedback loops, and a negative feedback loop occurs in biology when the product of a reaction leads to a decrease in that reaction. In this way, a negative feedback loop brings a system closer to a target of stability or homeostasis. Negative feedback loops are responsible for the stabilization of systems, and they ensure the maintenance of the body, or systems in general, to a steady and stable state.
Okay, so here I'll be talking about temperature regulation. And in temperature regulation for humans, we normally have a body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And so what happens is temperature increases, and then two mechanisms kick in. So we begin to sweat, and then vasodilation occurs. So in vasodilation, more blood is sent to the surface area, so it will expose to cooler areas. And then as sweat cools off, it causes evaporative cooling, and then the blood vessels become convective, and then normal temperature is regained. And so then, if the body were to cool, then the mechanism will also cool down. And then once when the mechanism kicks in, the goosebumps occurs, and then vasoconstriction also occurs. In humans, they tighten the surrounding skin, which reduces the surface area from which to lose heat. And then vasoconstriction ensures that only small surface areas will cool and retain heat. All right, next we have blood pressure regulation. And in blood pressure regulation, we have to keep it high enough that it pumps all blood to the parts of the body, and not too high that it damages it. And so while the heart is pumping, the heart receptors will then detect the pressure of the blood going to the arteries. And if the pressure is too high or too low, a chemical signal to the heart is adjusted for the rate of pumping. If blood pressure is too low, then heart increases, and if vice versa. Next, we have osmoregulation, and it allows us to control the concentration of various liquids within the body to maintain homeostasis. And then we will again look at an example of fish living in the ocean. And so the concentration of salt in the water surrounding the fish is much higher. And so the water within the fish, it causes the diffusion through the gills and then through food consumption and through drinking. So when the concentration of salt is higher outside than the inside of the fish, there is passive diffusion of salt and water in and out of the fish. And then salt concentration is then too high in the fish, and then salt ions must be released, so hence salt levels in the fish diminishing. And then the correct salt concentration is thus maintained.
The key difference between positive and negative feedback is that positive feedback amplifies the change while negative feedback reduces the change. This means that positive feedback will result in more of a product, more apples, more contractions, more clotting platelets. Negative feedback will result in loss of a product, less heat, less pressure, less salt. Positive feedback moves away from a target point, while negative feedback moves towards a target point. Why is feedback important? Without feedback, homeostasis cannot occur. This means that an organism loses the ability to self-regulate its body. Negative feedback mechanisms are more common in homeostasis, but positive feedback loops are also important. Changes in feedback loops can lead to various issues, including diabetes. In a normal glucose cycle, increases in blood glucose levels detected by the pancreas will result in the secretion of insulin until normal blood glucose levels are reached. Whereas if low blood glucose levels are detected, the pancreas will release glucagon to raise blood glucose levels to be normal again. All in all, feedback loops are biological mechanisms whereby homeostasis is maintained. This occurs when the product or output of an event or reaction changes the organism's response to that reaction. Negative feedback loops tend to dampen or buffer changes. This tends to hold a system to some equilibrium state, making it more stable.